Hello everyone, Memory here. Welcome to the auto-aiming machine gun Focus Ballista version. So, at the very start of the league, I decided to try out the new Focus Ballista support gem because for some reason that is one of the gems that caught my attention the most when I saw the 3.15 stream video. I used my old Deadeye build and moved the gems around to fit this skill in, and it worked out surprisingly well. I ended up killing some Shaper Guardians while doing some tests, and it looks like this on the screen. Now this build uses a Harvest bow before Harvest was nerfed, and I'm pretty sure most of the people won't be able to get a bow nearly as good as this one in this league. So I then use a 5-link Death Opus that happens to lie around in my storage as a replacement to give me a more realistic result for this league. And just for reference, my old bow has around 50% more overall DPS than Death Opus. Anyways, I still managed to defeat the Hydra with increased life, reduced crit damage taken, and reduced curse effect mods using this 5-link bow with not fully optimized link skills. I had to die a few times, but the fact that it is doable means it has hope for some further tuning. After tweaking things around here and there, I concluded that this build is a decent build that's worth a play in 3.15. It's even a viable league starter, which I will explain later in the video. As we all know, we received a huge nerf on most of the things in this patch, but this build still stands because Barrage, which is the core of this build, actually got a buff by around 15% in damage. And with the addition of the Focus Ballista support, this build has some very satisfying map clear. Just look at the way those bullets curve. This is one of those builds that you want to use when you decide to grind on something for a long period of time. Now I won't be going through all the details of how this build works. I will just be going through the important things that you probably want to know, so the video won't be too long. If you do want some more details, check out my previous version of the build because this video is mostly based on that build. And of course, I'll leave the POE down in the description below. Anyways, let's start with the skill links because this is where I changed the build the most. As you can see on the screen, this build uses 2 Barrage skills. One is on our Totem and one is self-cast. The Totem one is of course linked with Ballista Totem support, so it turns into a Barrage Totem and is able to utilize our new support gem, the Focus Ballista. Focus Ballista support makes the Ballista Totem focus fire at wherever you aim at, and they only fire when the character uses a projectile attack. This works in synergy with our Hydrosphere setup because all of those projectiles are going to funnel into the ball no matter where we aim. So it's very easy to control where you want all the bullets to go. And then we have multiple Totem, Chain, and Cold Penetration as the rest of the skill links. Now why don't we use other Ballista Totems? Well, because Artillery Ballista does not work with Chain since it is an arrow rain type of skill. Siege Ballista has an inbuilt +6 pierce, and any pierce we have is going to ruin this build. And then the last Ballista Totem, the Shrapnel Ballista, it just does no damage, even though it is the only one that mechanically worked with this build. As for our main Barrage skill, we have elemental damage with Attack, Chain, Cold Penetration, Ice Bite, and Power Charge on crits. Ice Bite is for Frenzy Charge sustained while mapping, and it also gives us a huge cold damage boost when we have 6 Frenzy Charges. It only loses to added cold damage by a few percent in terms of damage boosts, but it does provide some useful utilities, so I picked the Ice Bite here instead. Similarly, Power Charge on crit provides less damage compared to using increased crit chance. However, because having power charges means it adds damage to our Barrage Totem as well, so the total damage increase of using power charge on crit is almost the same as using increased crit chance. So I decided to use power charge on crit because, well, I like having blue balls flying around my character. We then have Frenzy, which is mainly for sustaining frenzy charges in boss fights. Frenzy Charge is a big part to our damage, so we need to guarantee we have it on at all times. I linked it with Calling Strike because it is a good utility skill that is available. The other 2 sockets is where I put my dash and second wind. Next, on the helmet, we have our Hydrosphere that is cast on bow attack for our auto aim, and we linked it with Enlighten because trigger skill now costs mana, so we want to save mana wherever possible. And we have Elemental Proliferation here so that in certain situations, the bow can provide some crowd control which increases our survivability since we are quite squishy. Last slot here is one of your auras because there are no other support gems that provides enough utilities to your Hydrosphere that justify the extra mana cost. The aura here can benefit from the inline support while not affecting our Hydrosphere mana cost at all. Last link here we have Enlighten, Herald of Ice as our last aura, Ice Golem and Sniper's Mark. We used to have a cost on damage taken Immortal Call here, but since trigger skill now costs mana, so that means half of the time it won't trigger properly since we already have some minor mana issues. And that's it for the skill links. As for gears, again in this league most people won't be able to get a bow as good as this one, so just go for a Death Opus bow, and that should be enough to get you through to tier 16 map at least. If you want to craft a better bow, you wanna go for a Hunter's Influence Imperial bow that has 2 additional projectiles and add a cold damage per 10 dex. And then bench craft some attack speed or crit chance, and that is already slightly better than the Death Opus. As for our gloves and shoes, I suggest one of the new base that has ward on it, which would probably help with survivability a lot. The damage that my gloves and boots provide is minor, so it is definitely worth to swap for more survivability since we no longer has cost on damage taken guard skills to utilize. The rest of the gears are the same required uniques as before. The passive tree is almost the same as well. I just took Mark of Death away and put them on far sides since POE says this does more damage with less points. And we already have Calling Strike on our Frenzy if we ever need it. Just follow the new POE and you should be fine. As for Flasks, now you need to get an Eternal Mana Flask that does not Q, and a Bleed or Freeze immunity, because you will run into mana problems if you don't have it. The rest of the flasks are the same as before. If you do have a Bottle of Faith, swap out Azuri's Promise because it provides the least amount of damage. And that's it for the build. It's actually League starter friendly as mentioned earlier, even though it does uses quite a bit of moderately expensive gear for a League starter. Before you get an Assonance Chant, you can play it as a pure Ballista Totem build. You swap the Focus Ballista support for added cold damage or Ice Bites, and your main hand is Frenzy, Calling Strike, Mana Leech, Chain and Power Charge on crit. So you mostly damage with the totems, and your Frenzy is buffing the totem's damage and provides some utilities. As you can see on the screen, I use my 5-link Death Opus using this exact link setup, and I can clear a tier 14 map without any problems. You might have noticed that the boss usually have difficulties moving towards us, because they're being knocked back by literally hundreds of bullets per second because of the King of the Hill passive. This greatly increases our survivability by reducing the chance of us getting hit. A lot of the time you probably will kill the boss off screen with this build, so even being naturally squishy, if you play this build properly, you actually don't die much at all. I think you can do tier 16 maps with the 5-link Death Opus totem only build if I really want to push it. And that means with cheap gears, this build can get you to early red maps no problem. And since none of the gears are really hyper expensive, so the upgrade curve of this build is fairly smooth, which is a good sign for a decent League starter. However, there are just 2 issues I have with this build. One is that if you don't have the Barrage MTX, it looks like this. You can't really see the bullets curving, so it kills a lot of the fun. Secondly, although every part of the gear are affordable, together they still cost a bit more than a typical League starter that has the same power level. So I'm currently working on some other potential League starter ideas to see if I can come up with something cheaper. And if none of them are good enough, I'll just use this one as my League starter. Anyways, that's it for today. Subscribe for extra mirror drop chance. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.